Android phone about 7 or 8 months ago, and everything kind of shifted over, and I couldn't remember an old email account, and I just couldn't get into the account anymore. So I just finally gave in and made a new account. Plus, I didn't really have all that much to report for a while, so I was like, well, I don't really go on and ramble on the same stuff. But then I realized, I'm starting fresh with a new station, new channel, whatever, so that I would, start a new, like, from the beginning, off the top. Here's my story, and here's where I'm at now. So I'm gonna try to wing this. Try to tell my story without notepads or flashcards and something trying to keep me on track, and we'll see how it goes. I mean, I'm telling my own story, so how hard can it be to remember? But if there's any awkward pauses, any just random, like, bear with me, because I'm trying and I really want to get this video up, and hopefully no one will call me. Okay, so where to start? My name's Heather. I am 37 years old, and I suffer from panic disorder, agoraphobia, or panic disorder with agoraphobia. Now, what that means, the panic disorder is basically like the fear of fear. You kind of constantly live in a state of, like, you're just afraid of having, like, another panic attack. Now, agoraphobia is the fear of having those panic attacks somewhere else. Like, so agoraphobia, it develops because you're like, I went to this store and had a bad panic attack, so I'm not going to go to that store anymore. Or I went to this school function and I had a panic attack, so I'm not going to go there anymore. And then, slowly you keep going places, and then you have panic attacks, or you're afraid you're going to have another panic attack, and pretty soon there's nowhere left to go, and you find yourself stuck at home, and it sucks. And it's a little easier nowadays, with all the technology, but it's still a very lonely existence. And but there's a lot of treatments available out there, and currently I'm doing really well with mine. I was suffering also from monophobia, which is the fear of being alone, for quite, I want to say, like 8 or 9 months, and that was a really, really tough time for me and for my family, and especially my husband, who was, in transitioning careers. So, backstory, I was diagnosed with this the first time when I was only diagnosed once. I was 16 years old. I was at a track meet in Boston, and I found myself struggling. I thought I had the stomach virus. I got really, really nauseous and warm, and I was convinced I had the stomach flu. But I went home, and it just kind of, like, up and then down, and then, like, up and then down. Like, the whole time, I'm like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god, when it would reach the peak, but then it would go back down. But the thing I couldn't figure out is why it was going up and down, and I wasn't just getting, like, really, really sick and then feeling better. So I went to see my mom, who was in a inpatient psych facility at the time. My mother suffers from borderline personality disorder and bipolar, or one or the other, or both. There's been a lot of controversy over my mother's specific diagnosis over the years, but I can cover that in another video. She looked at me, I told her what was happening, and she's like, you're having panic attacks. And I'm like, no idea what those are. They sent me to a doctor, and they gave me a bunch of medication, and not a bunch, they gave me like 3 different pills, but they made me kind of like a zombie. But I took them, and I started to feel a little bit better. I went back to school, I continued running track. I still thought that I was going to be, okay. I had to stop taking buses to track meets, though, with my teammates. I had to start having my dad follow the bus so that I could travel. It was really, really kind of embarrassing when I qualified for New England Championships my senior year, and I had to have my dad drive me there, but there was only me and, like, two other teammates, so it actually wasn't that bad. I ended up leaving school my senior year early. I dropped out, and then I went back. But then I dropped out again and eventually ended up with my GED. But there was like this just really weird time in my life, and I had put on a bunch of weight from the medication, and I was kind of like tired all the time, and I wasn't having panic attacks, but I was pretty miserable. Um, I didn't know how to handle life at that time. And all the things that I had planned, the colleges that I'd been accepted to college, I had all these, carefully laid out plans, and they all just kind of went, and I was just like, okay, well, I decided that I was going to move. I moved to Maine, and that was, a few states away. Obviously, that's a few states away from Massachusetts. I had family that lived up there, and I went and I stayed with my cousin, and got a job working at a pizza place. And I came back down here, and I just kept getting like one job after another job, and then like I found a job that I really liked, and I had benefits, and I was 20 years old, and I then found out my store was closing, and I lost my benefits, which meant no more, doctor's visits, and it was a mess. And then in the midst of all this chaos, I met a boy, and I thought that he was going to make my whole world better. And a couple months after we were dating, I found out I was pregnant. And I was just like in shock. They told me I was pregnant. I'm like, what? Huh? How? I was all confused. And I don't want to go into too many details, but basically, I had my daughter. My panic disorder was pretty minimal during the entire pregnancy. I split up with her father shortly after she was born. I had terrible, terrible postpartum. The next few years would be spent in hospitals and in experimenting with all kinds of drugs and alcohol and just checking out of life. I would just stay out and party all the time. Thankfully, I had my parents in my life, so they helped take care of my daughter, and her father's helped, and his parents helped, and now I have a great relationship with my daughter. She's a lot she's a teenager, so she's super fun, but she's a good kid. I love her very much. But back then I didn't know how to cope with anything, so I just checked out of life, got in a bunch of destructive relationships, abusive ones, got married, got divorced. I made a lot of crappy choices. Looking back, my 20s was just like, ugh. When I turned 30, I got out of now, mind you, I can't really tell you how bad my panic was or wasn't at the time. I never suffered from agoraphobia in that span of like 8 or 9 years, because I would get drunk so I could go out. So even if I was anxious, I was just wasted, so it didn't really matter. Now, when I turned 30 I turned 30 in 2010. God, I feel old. I'm sorry for anybody who's watching this that's, much older than me, and I don't mean, I'm just joking. I feel young. I feel pretty young. And I'd like to think that I look like I'm still in my 20s, maybe. Maybe if I don't scrunch my face up or don't close up on the wrinkles in my eyes. Again, I'm sure there's some person older than me rolling their eyes at my statements, but, anyway. How many times can I say in this video? Let's make it a drinking game. I'm just kidding. I don't drink anymore. At 30, I got sober, and I got to finally kind of have clarity. Unfortunately, with that clarity, 3 months after getting sober, came massive, massive amounts of anxiety and panic. And within, 3 months after that, I was completely housebound, living at my parents' house, thinking that, why did I even bother getting sober? Because this life is just not worth, existing. And I continued to just get worse and worse, and I would have to, try to help around the house, and I couldn't even leave the room at some point. Like, I would get nervous going from, like, the upstairs to the downstairs. So I'd have to have people, like, walk me upstairs, take a shower, like, sit outside the door. Like, it was really, really bad. But that was just, the reality of what I was experiencing. That continued. I slowly started to force myself out. I wasn't really seeing a therapist at the time. I was on very, very minimal medication. I was on a mood stabilizer and an anti-anxiety medication, but I was still on fairly minimal meds compared to what I'd been on in the past. And so it was okay, but I started slowly like making small changes in my life. Like, first of all, my parents' house is just straight up chaos. It hasn't changed in years. It's just chaos. And I had to get out of there. If I was ever going to stand a chance of getting better, I had to get the heck out of that place. Not that I don't love my parents dearly, but there was just a lot of other stuff going on there. And so I rented my own place, and I had a roommate, and I got involved with AA, and I started volunteering, and I was still noticing that there was still a lot of stuff that really made me upset, but I just pushed. Like, I pushed myself to be there. Even if it was, like, just for a couple of minutes. Like, I pushed myself and slowly things got easier. And that was great for, everyone involved. I started getting regular jobs, and eventually I ended up as a store manager, and that was really good. And I met a guy. He was an old friend that I hadn't seen in, like, I don't know. Actually, I had seen him a couple of years before. He was friends with my sister, and he had just gotten married. And the next thing I knew, I had heard, I think a week before running into him, I had heard that he was getting divorced. And I was like, wow, that's great. And then I run into him, and I was like, didn't you just get divorced? Anyway, this is a lot of information. Not really pertinent to anything. So, back to the panic disorder. So things were going well. Met the boy. Things continued to go well. Panic disorder returned one day at work. Hit me like a ton of bricks out of nowhere. Couldn't walk, couldn't see straight. Forgot what panic attacks were even really like. A full-blown panic attack. Now, I'd had anxiety, and I think a lot of times we mistake anxiety for panic disorder. Or panic attack, rather, when really it's an anxiety attack or just prolonged high levels of anxiety. And really, we think we're having panic attacks for hours, but we're not. We're just having really high anxiety. And, that's what happened. I had a lot going on in my life, and I lost that job. And I loved that job. I loved it so much. And I was going to lose my apartment, so I was going to move back home to that wonderful home of my parents, which was always a lovely thing. But my boyfriend was like, you know what? Why don't you move in here? And so I did. And 5 months after, no, you know what? Yeah, 5 months after that, we were engaged, and a few months after that, we got married. And now, my panic disorder came back first. It didn't come back. I mean, I've always had it. It just kind of, like, I recovered, and it kind of went into some sort of, like, I don't know, some type of, like, remission state. It was there, under the surface, always kind of just waiting to get out. But I was, I was handling it, panic attacks didn't scare me. And that's when I think that recovery is actually recovery. When those panic attacks, you don't fear them. So, like, you don't avoid places because of them. You don't stop doing things. Your life isn't interrupted by the panic attacks day to day. And for 2.5 years now, I was really struggling. The panic got worse. The agoraphobia got worse. I never was going anywhere. I lost friends. I barely talked to my family. I was super depressed. I went into hospital twice. I was never, suicidal, but I didn't want to live. Like, it was like, this is not an existence. And I've slowly started getting better the last few months. I've been traveling. I went on vacation. It was like a 5-hour drive, and we stayed for a few days, and my husband's been working at the same place now. He changed careers, and he's been there for a year almost, and it's been really good. Now, I don't think about panic attacks like I used to. I still am terrified of them. I haven't had a really, really bad one since, okay, I'm telling you this truth. I had a really, really bad panic attack last night. Probably one of the worst panic attacks I've had ever. Like, top 5, seriously. Thought I was gonna die. Crying, hysterical, just mess. However, the difference is that once it was over, and I carried on with my life. I didn't, let it obsess about, oh God, it's all done, it's all over, it's all, it did sit there for a couple of minutes, but it got to the point where I was like, okay, you know what? It happened. That sucked. But you know what? Tomorrow you're going to get back up and you're going to do the stuff you've been doing and you're going to let the progress that you've made continue. You're going... Sorry, my battery warning came up for a second there. Probably shouldn't have started a video on 28%. But if for any of you who watched my last channel, the sassypantsmcgee, lovely name, right? New one's Panic Girl, which I think both are pretty appropriate because I'm fairly sassy and I am panicky too, so I think it works. But there's been many things that have contributed to from like where I was even 6 months ago to where I am now, and like cognitive behavioral therapy and seeing a psychologist who specialized in anxiety disorders was tremendously helpful. And friends, I have my best friend, she lives in Liverpool, England. She suffers from the exact same condition, and I feel like we do our exposure therapy together in a way. Like we make videos, and like, I mean, I walk places now. Like I walk over a mile from my house, and I'm looking to start taking the train again, and I'm even looking into like working, which is huge, like huge. And I do have setbacks sometimes. Last night's panic attack, I think, was just crazy amounts of cumulative stress, just all, because we've had some money issues, I've had some health problems, I've had money issues because of health problems, and my father-in-law was up visiting from Florida, and just all this stuff, But cognitive behavioral therapy, I highly recommend it if you can find a therapist that is willing to practice CBT and exposure therapy with you. I really, it's made a tremendous difference. Now, one of the things that I do still really struggle with is health anxiety, but I'm working on that one slowly, day by day. I went to a doctor, I went to several doctors and had them run all these tests to make sure that how I was feeling was in fact panic related and anxiety related. And it's really, I understand, like, it's hard to decipher, but once you do get that clean bill, sometimes it's a lot easier for you to be like, okay, well, maybe I have to look at that. But now I can tell you, I can walk out of my house every single day and I can go somewhere. I can take an Uber, I can go with my husband, I can go to Walmart, I can go to the mall, I can go to the juice place down the street, I can go to the town common, I can go out with friends, I can go just everywhere. And I can do a lot of it by myself, which is something I couldn't even say a couple months ago. So I will go into this more later, and I will go into things that have happened more recently, maybe take you on a video exposure therapy trip with me. And two really great books that I found that have helped me were the the Anxiety and Phobia Workbook. I can't think of who writes it at the moment, but if you just type that into Google, it will show you. And also the Mastery of Panic and Anxiety, and I'm probably saying that wrong, but the really important thing for me was to get out every single day, and I know I'm specifying most of this is for agoraphobia, but for me a lot of this is the main thing, like the agoraphobia. But thankfully I have a wonderful support system and good friends and family who I've helped now. Like, I've been able to kind of put things out there, and there's this person I knew from school who's starting a vlog who I met way back when I first was diagnosed, and I guess he had been diagnosed the same year, and it was kind of like first person I ever knew that suffered from an anxiety disorder. And so that was the beginning of it all, and that's my story, and I'm sure I left a bunch out, and I'm sure I went into way too much detail, but you know what? I don't care. If you're out there suffering, if you're housebound, if you're somewhere else in the other part of your recovery, just keep going. Keep moving forward. Anything about Dr. Claire Weeks, there's a podcast, which I can probably figure out how to link below, called That Anxiety Guy, that is put on by my friend Drew, and he's amazing. And it's just great. Things are great, and they're finally looking up, and I'm happy, and I just had my birthday, and everything's okay. So I'll talk to you all later. Nice to see you again, and for those new people, welcome. I look forward to talking to you again. Bye.